Hello everyone, this is Abhilash Nandi. I'm a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur in its Computer Science and Engineering department. So I was just seeing the videos uh, by Yannick Kilcher and Miss Coffee Bean. So they they are doing a very good job in propagating knowledge by explaining state-of-the-art research papers. So what I thought is, okay, I am not that knowledgeable, but I thought since my broad field of work is in natural language processing, why not I also contribute as much as I can to explaining papers in the field of NLP. So basically, what I'm doing today is I'm explaining this particular paper on TransformerXL. So I chose this paper uh, not because it's recent, because of course it's not, but because it contains some good concepts, some novel concepts uh, which can be used further on for other such related work. So that's that, and so I guess let's get started with the paper. So as the name suggests, it's Transformer XL. So yeah, before moving on, I would like to point out that I have mentioned the prerequisites required for this in the description, so you may want to go through that. So if you're familiar with it, you may just start away with the video. So yeah, so here this is Transformer XL. So why this XL part? So this XL stands for extra long. So what do they mean by this extra long? So here extra long is basically telling you like the context. So what do we mean by context here? So as you might know, transformers are champions when it comes to uh, you know like uh, deciphering very long contexts without losing track of the theme of uh, or the idea which a particular sentence or a particular paragraph carries. So what this paper is doing is it is trying to improve on that. So it is trying to improve on the long term dependencies. So basically what I mean by long term dependencies is especially when you have very long sentences and you want to do some sort of a language modeling on that. So we'll come to what is all that language modeling and all, but in essence, if we want to learn the trends in the in a particular big huge corpus which contains very long sentences, if we want, if a model has to, if a transformer model needs to understand that, so it needs to attend to various it needs to attend to long contexts in general. So as you may know, in various transformer models, state of the art transformer models, like the which use encoders, so I'll just mention those. So encoders, sorry. So yep, okay. So encoders, for instance, but then you have other encoders like Roberta. So why have I written as encoders? Because their job is basically they perform some sort of a language modeling for some sort of for encoding text and then using it for some downstream tasks. But over here, that's not the focus over here. So over here, what we are doing is simple language modeling. So you are given basically a prompt, say the future of AI is. So after this, you would need to predict what comes after this. So you need to there is given a fixed prompt. This is the prompt, and you need to basically predict uh, not you, I mean the model, the transform model needs to predict what comes after this. So over here what is used is known as decoders. So as you might be aware, transformer, the original transformer, had an encoder as well as a decoder. So here we'll be only concentrating on decoders, as our main concern over here is on language modeling, right? So okay, let's again see the title. It's attentive language models beyond a fixed length context. So this beyond and fixed length context. So fixed length context. So before this paper was released, so there were only so good decoders that could like used only fixed length contexts, maybe of the order of a few hundreds. uh, Only that was used for the training purpose, and so the output generated was not that impressive, not that uh, not close to what a human would write, right? So there is where transformer XL comes. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so over here, as you can see, transformers have a potential of learning long-term dependency. Yeah, they have a potential, however they are limited by a fixed length context. So there is where transformer XL comes in, and so there are some jargons over here. So dependency beyond a fixed length, of course, learning dependency beyond a fixed length without disrupting temporal coherence. So what this temporal coherence means, we'll come to it in a bit. So it consists of a segment level recurrence. Okay, so here this is the main thing which it has, its weapon. So its weapon is segment level recurrence mechanism. We'll come to this, but basically it's like, as you already know, I'll just move over here. So yeah, so transformers in general have this thing known as self attention. So self attention is, you can like see, I have posted a few links in the description on this thing, self attention. However, briefly speaking, like if we have a sentence, the ball is in the bag, right? So basically over here, if you see, the ball is in the bag. So where is the ball? So the ball has some relation with the bag, right? So like these relations in between the words, like which word is more connected to the other, or how does one word give meaning to the other, right? So these relations are basically, learned using an attention mechanism. So how much does the word ball attend to the word bag? So how important are these two in relation to each other? There is where self attention comes into the picture. It's called self attention because it's in the same sentence, or say sequence, right? So yeah, so like you'll have some sort of an attention matrix in which basically with every pair of words you'll have some sort of an attention score, and based on that attention score you'll get a you'll get a signal during training, a training signal. So that is how self attention works. However, here comes recurrence mechanism in this paper. So recurrence is something which is characteristic of RNN. So as you know, in RNNs, the main policy over there is that of recurrence. So given input, you have some sort of an hidden state, and you have some output, right? So this recurrence which goes on here, the recurrence in uh, the hidden state, I mean, this hidden state gets passed on from, like, there are time steps, and the inputs, like there is some xi and there is yi, where I is the time step, and so basically it itself gives it a feedback. So the hidden state itself gives it a feedback every time step. So that is a recurrence mechanism. So what this paper does is it uses this recurrence mechanism in order to like uh, encode the word, so that using this recurrence mechanism it can have longer dependencies. So, and also another thing which is really important is a novel is the novel positional encoding scheme. Okay, so we'll discuss this later on. You need not worry about that right now. So TransformerXL learns dependency that is 80% longer than RNNs and 450% longer than vanilla transformers. So yeah, so the basic focus in this paper, or the selling point in this paper, is basically this longer dependency. So that's what this paper really focuses on, and it focuses on techniques which lets it do that. So yeah, and also one more side advantage is basically it improves the inference time. It is 1800 plus faster times than transformers. So that's that, and these are basically the data sets. So we'll come to that. So this is just the introduction on language modeling, and here they like show how RNNs and LSTMs are not that potent when it comes to long-term dependencies in the language, and it really boils down to this number of context words which it has, or in other words, the, if I may write, it's a sequence length that it has. So sequence length is basically a bottleneck over here. So, and here they mention some improvements that were tried on that. However, the main disadvantages that, or the main bottlenecks that still existed even after that, are two. So one is obviously, as I already told, so this long-term dependency. So because of the fixed context length, it cannot, like if you have a context length of say 100, so if there is a sentence of say 200 words, then obviously you cannot like have, and say like the first word has relation with the 150th word, right? So obviously you cannot have any sort of uh, say attention going on between the two, any sort of dependency going on between the two. So that is a real disadvantage. And so another thing which was lacking is that whenever like, so in general whenever language modeling is done, a huge corpus is used for training, right? So like you may have, say I'll just draw it this way, right? So you'll have the first sentence, the second sentence, third sentence, and so on, right? So I'm just drawing in terms of boxes. So if you have say a fixed, and obviously their lengths will not be fixed, so let's say their lengths are maybe how much, like I'll just consider some arbitrary lengths, 50, 25, 35, right? And let's say you have a sequence length of say 70, right? So what you will be doing is, from the starting you'll just consider, blindly will consider these 70. So obviously this part is getting shifted to the next segment. So if I'm calling this thing as a segment, one sequence length is one segment, so it's getting shifted to the next segment. So what is happening is, this part which should have been a part of this sentence in order to understand the complete context, that is lost. So this particular thing in which there is a loss of context, that is called, this is due to context fragmentation. So these are basically the contexts are being divided into fragments, which is undesirable, right? So these two are the problems. So in order to like so in order to remove these limitations, this transformer XL was introduced. So yeah, this is just, they are basically okay. So these things will be covered later. Okay, so this is basically the related work, which is like just already be knowing on like this LSTMs and RNNs, and that's sort of a repetition. Yeah. So here is one thing which the model sort of, so this particular thing, the way the things are like the inference goes on is pretty normal. It's similar to the vanilla transformer. So I'll just draw it. So these are say your, so this is the initial embedding layer, right? And say this is the hidden state 1, there is some hidden state 2, blah blah blah. So just change the color. Yeah, so for each embedding, so for this basically coming from a particular word, this is a word, this is a word, there are, okay, so I'm just considering a sequence length of 5. So in any particular decoder type architecture where you are trying to predict what is the future, you obviously can only see, you are allowed to see the words present in the past. So basically speaking, this will have a dependency, or in this case basically the transformer layer, the attention mask, if you may say. So that will only basically, the dependency will only be on this particular token. It won't be on this because it cannot see the future. It can only see the present and the past. Similarly for this, it will be this particular token and this. This, it will be this, this, and this, and so on. So this is what is basically written over here. So that's a pretty normal thing for transformers. So this is like directly taken from the vanilla transformer. And yeah, finally you like have some sort of MLP, a linear layer at the end, so which basically gives you the logits, and then you apply a softmax, and then a categorical probability distribution is obtained. Fine. So okay, so these are just like again vanilla transformer language models. So okay, so this is, here we are coming to the main crux of the paper. Okay, so yeah, so this diagram basically shows you key in vanilla transformers how uh, the things are trained. So basically these segments are basically one sequence length. So here sequence length is 4, right? So as you can see over here, there is no interdependency between this segment and this segment. They are like, they have their own, like within the segment there is obviously this attention thing going on, but there is like nothing, like no link between segment 1 and segment 2 while training. Whereas there is one, at least there is one advantage during evaluation phase, which is that, so over here as you can see, if we consider, just enlarge it a bit, so over here if you consider x5, so for x5 as you can see, so this particular hidden state has no dependency other than like this x5, whereas if you consider during the evaluation phase, it has dependency on all of like the hidden representations of all of these embeddings. So over here the context fragmentation thing is mitigated to certain extent during evaluation. However, uh, the sequence length is still the fixed length of 4. So yeah, so this disadvantage is still there in the evaluation phase. So yeah, so that is basically how vanilla transformers work, right? That's what is here. Okay, now comes segment level recurrence with state reuse. So huge words, sorry, segment level recurrence. Okay, segment level recurrence, as I think we have discussed it briefly earlier, it's state reuse. So what's this? So basically over here, okay, so I think if I quickly jump onto this, it will be fine. Okay, sure. So, or rather it will be fine with the diagram. Yeah, that's better, much better. All right. So basically we'll come to this no grad and all this. So fine. So let's consider this particular segment. So this is segment number 1. This is segment number 2. For segment number 1, it's basically, it goes on in the same fashion as here. Like it has this particular dependencies, and accordingly it will backpropagate, so it will train. Fine. So the second sequence length of the second segment, there is a difference. So it has the same sequence length, mind you. However, uh, the main advantage over here is that um, these, like, once this first segment is learnt, what is done is these are cached. So these are stored, basically these hidden states are stored. So what happens is, after that, these hidden states will be used for will be used in the self attention mechanism. So basically, if you recall, there is a query, there is a there is query, there is key, and there is value vectors, these three vectors. So queries come from here for the second segment, of course. Queries come from here, keys and values come from both the segments. So we'll get to it in a bit, like how this is happening using formulas. But the thing is that there is also, as you can see in these green lines, so there is also this sort of a dependency that is coming from the previous segment onto this particular thing, such that for every output or every hidden state, there are basically 4 dependencies. Fine. So, and why is this no grad? It's because once this segment is trained, and then when the next segment is being trained, over here there is no backpropagation. Just the cached values are used, and they are used in the only the feed forward part of the network. Fine. So this was the training phase. So obviously it so if you keep on repeating this, like there is segment 1, segment 2, segment 1 is kind of has a is contributing to segment 2. Now segment, if you consider segment 3, after that segment 2 will be contributing to segment 3, and so on. So this basically, if you recall, if we consider uh, this as, it's very similar to an RNN, where hidden states are like, or at different time steps are dependent on the previous ones. And so you can call like for any particular segment that you're learning, the previous time steps are sort of a memory, because they are basically cached, and they are then used to update. They also contribute to the updating part of the present hidden states, right? So here is where recurrence comes into the picture, and so this context fragmentation thing disappears, and obviously you'll have longer dependencies. Similarly, when you come for the evaluation part, so as you can see over here, um, so this particular output, or say hidden state, depends, like if it is the final layer or not. So that is dependent on these 4, right? Which was not the case in the vanilla transformer, right? So that's because you did not have this caching. So it was basically, so this is not exactly, so obviously this is dependent on this as well, but this is basically speaking like how many embeddings are responsible for the final output at a particular position. So over here 4 only are responsible, so this triangle is drawn. However, over here, so if we work our way backwards, this is contributed by these 4. Now each of these, like this is contributed by these 4, this is contributed by these 4, and so on. So you'll come till here. Now this is again contributed by these 4, right? So like there is where you get an extra edge when it comes to this kind of a caching, and then using it for getting the key and the value vectors in the uh, in the self attention mechanism, right? So right, I'll just show the equation, right? Okay, sure. So like, so here over here n represents the layer, and tau represents, if we are the segment, basically which segment, or we also call it as the time step, right? So basically you have this hidden state. So basically what we are trying to do, the final is like, at a given we are at time step tau, right? And we have, like, yeah, given we are at a time, not just at a time step tau, so basically we want to predict what is the hidden state value for layer n, right? And we are taking this as the time step for now, tau plus 1. So what will it be dependent on? So we'll work our way backwards again. So I mean from the beginning. So over here, this h tilde n minus 1 tau plus 1. So what is the, okay, so these notations are a bit important. So this is basically, I'll just draw it here, right? So this is your tau. These are the segments, okay? So this is tau plus 1, and over here you will have some, obviously these are the segments if it is sequence length 4, and you'll have their dependencies and all. So, and let's say this is n and this is n plus 1. So obviously for n minus, okay, so this is like for n minus 1, I'm sorry, this is n, this is n minus 1. So n minus 1 and tau plus 1, right? So this is sort of a pseudo hidden state, all right? So this is basically, so it's basically, all right, so it's basically like so SG stands for stop gradient, we'll come to that. H tau n minus 1, so H tau, which is over here, and n minus 1, so it's basically talking about this one, right? And H n minus 1 tau plus 1, which is this one. So basically what it is trying to say is that these two, when, so this stands for concatenation, so these two when concatenated would be used for predicting, in the feed forward network, of course, predicting the next layer's hidden states, right? And stop gradient, why stop gradient? Because over here there is no back propagation, right? Okay, fine. So this is something which we are using. All right, so here is where the key and the value things come. So this would be required for our self-attention mechanism, query keys and values. So this is for time step tau plus 1. And yeah, of course, if you want to like brush up your self-attention techniques, please feel free to check out the links that are given in the description. So yeah, so this is for the time step tau plus 1, or the segment. Okay, I'll just call it the segment tau plus 1. And the hidden state n. So for that, it's basically comes from, so basically these will be used finally to get our final h and tau plus 1, obviously. So this will, so the basically the query that directly comes from h tau plus 1 n minus 1, which is just this. So obviously, like, if you recall for the encoder decoder self attention as well, the query used to come from like that particular decoder inputs only. Similarly, for the tau plus 1 at the time step, it basically comes from that particular time steps inputs or the previous hidden state only. Whereas for the key and the value, these two are concatenated, and then we use this, of course, the weight matrices, right? So these are the query key value pairs and tuple, and this tuple goes as an input to this self attention. So basically it's a transformer layer, because of course we'll have self attention, and then we'll have some sort of layer norm and feed forward network onto which this particular value will just get added up, and so it's the normal transformer layer is applied, and so finally you get the next hidden state at time step tau plus 1. So this is just an explanation of how things are calculated. So fine, I'll just drift. All right, so Okay, so here is an important thing. All right, so consequently, the largest possible dependency length grows linearly with respect to the number of layers as well as the segment length. So this is an important point. So dependency length. So by dependency length, what they mean is this particular triangle or the base of the triangle, right? So over here, if you see the sequence length is sorry, so sorry. So the sequence length is 4, and if you see the number of layers are okay. It's not exactly. It's like number of layers minus 1, so it's 3. It is 12, and of course, like it's not exactly adding up, obviously, but you can say it's roughly of the order of the number of hidden states, and and basically the sequence length. So that's the base of this particular triangle. So this is your sort of a dependency length, right? Or you may say the field of view, sort of. If you that term would be used for CNNs. However, over here it would be the dependency length. So obviously it like otherwise it would have been just L. However, so basically if you increase the number of layers, and as can be seen later also, the performance will improve as it will have a larger dependency length. So that's that. And yeah, and because it like caches all the hidden states which come at previous time steps, so it's 1800 plus times faster than the vanilla model. So there are certain techniques which are used, like obviously the caching thing helps, rather than like in the vanilla transformer model everything is calculated from scratch, whereas over here you are caching the previous hidden states, so that really helps. And it's not that you have to only cache the just the previous segment. If your GPU is such that it can hold more segments, you can also do that. So it might so happen that yeah, so that's what actually is written here. In theory, in theory, we can cache as many previous segments as the GPU memory allows and reuse all of them as the extra content when processing the current segment. This is a really important point. So, so till now we have learned two advantages. One is, or okay, so it's basically a pack of three. So one is it gives a longer dependency length, and also like it solves the problem of context fragmentation. So there is interdependency between the segments, there is a recurrence going on, and third is it also improves the inference time. All right, now coming to another advantage is this. So this is, it's not exactly an advantage, it's sort of like if you if you are using this particular sort of recurrence between the segments. So if you are using in like if you consider this particular equation over here, yeah, so over here you are using like time steps tau, just use the red pen, yeah, tau plus 1 as well as tau. Two segments are being used at a time. So if you recall, in transformers we had positional embedding. So positional embeddings was basically to give a sense to the transformer as to how the tokens are located with respect to each other, because that part is not exactly captured by the attention mechanism, which was pretty evident in RNN otherwise. However, in order to the encode the positional basically the location signal of the input, this particular positional encoding needs to go in as input. However, if so in the transformer, in the original transformer paper, we had absolute positional encodings starting from the 0 to the sequence length basically. So as you can see here, if you were to use the original absolute encoding, then what would happen is, so in both the cases, in both the case of tau plus 1 and tau, the hidden states, you would use u1 to L and plus u1 to L, right? Obviously, because that's how it would have been. So it wouldn't have depended on the times, like the time step. It would be like for a particular segment, I have 1 2 till L. This is for tau, and for tau plus 1 also, because it basically is like dependent on the input which is being given, uh, pertaining to one sequence length. So that's how it would have been. However, the problem is the model has no information, no information to distinguish the positional difference between x tau j and x tau plus 1 j. This is the issue. So how do we resolve this? So we use some sort of a relative positional information in the hidden states, right? So this relative positional information is helpful when you are using such recurrence between the segments. So this is not exactly an advantage. This is sort of something they had to do so as to properly implement this particular segment recurrence. So uh, just briefly explain this. This is a bit bulky. All right, so I'll just straight move on to the formula. All right, so what is this? Okay, so what does this represent? So this is basically the attention score between the query Q and the key vector J within the same segment as in a standard vanilla transformer. So what they've done is, basically it would have been as follows. I'll just write it. So basically it would have been something like, so it's like absolute I and absolute J are being used, right? So it would have been EXI plus, so EXI plus UI, right? And obviously you'll have WQ transpose, right? And WK, please forgive me for the transpose parts, okay? And EXJ plus UJ. Why am I adding these two? Because the positional encoding is added with the basically the word embeddings, the initialized word embeddings, and on top of that, you are having this particular query weight matrix and the key weight matrix. So this is your query, you may say query matrix, because it will be a vector for each position, right? And the key matrix K. This basically query transpose, because this would be over here, right? So it's basically weight times the input. Okay, let's not get confused on that. So it's basically weight times the embedding plus the positional encoding, right? All right. So basically this is used in the attention formula. However, like in this case, what they are doing is, so like relative, if you are to convert it into a relative positional information, so first things first, obviously uh, uj, right? So obviously these things won't change, right? So this won't change. Wke, there is a reason of writing this, we'll come to that. This will become ri minus j, because the relative position would become like I minus j. Yeah, we like it's all relative right now. So it's basically like, instead of having like, you may say u1 u2, so u1 would correspond to position 1, u2 would correspond to position 2. These are the position encodings and so on. Now what will happen is, r1 will correspond to a relative difference. Like whenever there is a relative difference of 1 between two positions, then uh, Ri minus j would be the positional encoding. So the positional encoding will not depend on the absolute positions, it will depend on the relative positions of the of the inputs. And so is over here, like uj is replaced by Ri minus j. All right. So what about this part? So over this part is a bit tricky. At least I found it a bit tricky. So yeah, this secondly, we introduce a trainable parameter u belongs to Rd. So basically they are just shunning this particular I over here. They are replacing the query UI transpose WQ. So I didn't really understand this wholly, but what their argument is the query vector is the same for all query positions. So it suggests that the attentive bias towards different words should remain the same regardless of the query position. So regardless of I, basically what they mean to say is regardless of I, you would like to keep the same vector. So it won't depend on I anymore. So this whole thing is basically crushed down to U. That becomes U transpose. All right. So what was UI transpose WQ transpose anyways? That was basically the query vector. So query vector, so it's directly replaced by a learnable query vector. Similarly, UI transpose WQ transpose is replaced by another learnable query vector. All right, independent of the position. That's what they do over here. So there is a reason behind that. We'll come to that later. And so instead of having just the same, WK weights, so that is also like you have two different weights. This is related to embedding and this is related to the relative location, WKE, WKR. So whenever you are like using, you have EXJ over here, you will have WKE, and whenever you have RIR, you'll have WKR. So it's basically like it's basically like you have different key weight matrices for the position and the embedding. You have different key weight matrices. So why is this done? So if we consider these terms uh, A, B, C, and D, they are very nicely explained here. It's okay, sure. So this is A represents a content based addressing. Like A over here is totally content based. It's all embedding, right? It's all embedding out there. B represents a content dependent positional bias term. Right. So content based positional. So over here, as you can see, this is the content embedding and this is the position, right? All right. Okay. C is a global content bias and D is a global positional bias. So why is C a global content bias? So why is it global first of all? So if we for once ignore, so basically both these terms do not have any I in them, right? They do not have any positional. So there is this relative positional argument here, and I have a bit confusion key why this, like, even though there is xj, why are they calling it global? However, if we just ignore it for a while, then what we can see is it's independent of any absolute position as such. So basically this so this term is basically the global uh, content, as you can see, context content bias, and this encodes a global positional bias. So like, so both like local as well as global uh, content based encoding and position based encoding is rightly summed up over here. And then obviously finally there are some nitty-gritties on the calculation and all, but yeah, however, I'll just go through the final formula. So this is basically similar to what we had earlier. However, this is replaced by M. So M here represents memory. So they didn't want to write it as the hidden state anymore, because that is being replaced by the term memory over here, which is M. And this is again the same thing. Okay, so over here, this particular formula comes from what we just learned. All right, and over here, so this part is normal attention. So there is this value vector or the value matrix, and over here you have masked softmax, obviously, which is like you normalize it, and masked because it is only dependent on the past terms, and so you have attention mask. All right, and this is like the normal transformer layer. So there is a linear layer onto which it gets added, and there is a layer norm. Then there is another feed forward layer. All right. So fine. Okay, so this is all, yeah. So okay, so let's now see how well it performs, right? So as you can see, they have done experiments on quite a few data sets, like as here they include Wikitext 103, NVIC 8, Text 8, 1 billion word, and Pen Tree Bank. So all of these are relatively older data sets. However, like they at that point of time it was sort of benchmark, so I think it was the right choice. All right, so like if we consider the dataset Wikitext 103, so basically in Wikitext 103 it's basically Wikipedia articles, and it has 100 million training tools. So these are basically the specifics of the dataset. So yeah, so one thing I would like to point out over here, which is a small thing important, is for evaluating such language models, you have generally entropy based uh, metrics. So entropy based, why? Because the tendency or the not the tendency, the uncertainty of the model in predicting the token, uh, say at the kth token, given the k minus one tokens before that. So if there is the more the uncertainty in the model, the worse the model is basically. So right. So basically, if this PPL is some sort of, sorry, this PPL is some sort of a 2 to the power entropy. If I represent it, it's roughly that, right? So basically, higher the PPL versus the model, so lower is the better. Similarly, BPC, so that is stands for bits per character. So basically it is like if you want to encode any like a corpus, uh, or not corpus, I mean characters in terms of basically bits. uh, so basically this is also a proxy for entropy. So this is basically it represents the average entropy. So again, if this value is higher, the model is worse, and of course lower the better. Fine, these two are the metrics that are used. And so yeah, so this is basically like, okay, I'll just directly tell it from here. So over here their transformer model performs better, so as it's actually evident because they have lots of parameters. However, these two are comparable, still is able to perform better, which is sort of a good thing. And okay, so this is another thing, that there was this work which used, so this work basically had some sort of auxiliary losses which are incorporated. However, TransformerXL was able to beat that even with a fraction of its parameters. It improved the performance, and as well as it did not have any auxiliary losses. Even after that, it was able to do this better. So I think that might be, it's written in the paper that it might be due to its better architecture, right? So, and if we consider again this particular transformer on text 8, which is actually a variant of NVIC 8, so it performs similarly. Fine, and this is the 1 billion word corpus. So here is a catch, that the 1 billion word corpus actually has sentences jumbled up, so it is not like a continuous corpus. So over here basically what we are trying to see is, if any model performs good in this particular corpus, it would mean that it can perform well when it comes to short term dependencies, right? It can perform well in that. So it's that kind of a setting. However, over here also our transformer XL very nicely like is able to beat all the state of the art of that time. So this particular adaptive input thing comes up a lot. So you can check this out. So if you can see, like, the number of parameters are less, even after that it is able to like beat this pretty convincingly. So it's sort of an indication that it can even like uh, it can even work even if the um, context lengths are small, right? So that's that. And yeah, so this Babsky and Ollie, this particular thing is basically a transformer only. This is sort of the vanilla transformer only, and so it is able to beat that. All right. Okay. So there is this word level pen tree bank dataset also. This is a really old dataset. However, uh, on applying the similar kind of settings on TransformerXL, so TransformerXL again achieves a new SOTA result. Fine. So this is like they have like just shown that, and so which implies that it generalizes to even small datasets. Fine. All right. So here is a bit of an ablation study. So I'll just jump to the table for now. So in this particular ablation study, as you can see, uh, okay, so this is basically like to compare the features of the relative positional encoding and basically like the segment recurrence part. All right, so this so some of these like have recurrence and some of these don't have recurrence. So the ones which have recurrence, they perform a lot better as compared to the others. And even though like yeah, so this is a classic example. So this is a transformer based model with many parameters, however, or with sorry with similar uh, number of parameters. However, this performs really bad. It has a very high ppl, right? It has a very high ppl. So I guess that's for the so that's for the recurrence part. And when it comes to this particular half and full losses, so that basically refers to applying cross entropy loss to all or the recent half positions in the segment. So I guess I didn't catch it exactly. However, what I feel is this refers to like some sort of like how long is the dependency length or something like that. So this thing needs to be looked into. This was not quite clear to me. So all in all, this relative positional encoding really really solves really improves the state of the art even on short sequences, and segment level recurrence as well substantially improves performance even when long term dependency is not needed. So that they are stressing it again and again key that if there is this long term dependency required, even there it is able to solve the problem of context fragmentation. And even in the ones where long-term dependency is not required, like the 1 billion data set, 1 billion word data set, it is still performing, it is still like it's still the new state of the art as compared to the other models at that time. All right, so finally there is this relative effective context length. So what this is in essence, I'll just explain it very briefly. So this effective context length is basically it's sort of you may say like you keep increasing the context length or the sequence length, and you see like what is the maximum length after which the like there is no like the no considerable gain in the result. So obviously it's pretty intuitive that if you go on increasing the sequence length, it should the results should improve. However, it's not always the case, and after a particular sequence length at a point, the results they do not increase any more considerably. So this a small modification of this is basically applied in this case, and as you can see in yeah, as you can see over here, table 8, transformer XL manages to model dependency of 900 words long on sorry, on average. So with r equal to 0.1, so basically here r is something that they have defined, so which means constraining the top comparison on top are hard examples. So this is something like which they have defined, which may be looked into. However, like yeah, so the main takeaway from here is the effective context length of transformer XL is 80% and 50% longer than RNNs and transformers respectively. So basically it is able to keep its promise that using its segment recurrence and using the relative positional encoding framework, it is able to have a longer dependency and a longer effective context length, right? So these this is on the evaluation speed that has already been discussed, and this is the conclusion that so basically it's a longer term dependency than RNNs and vanilla transformers, speed up during evaluation, and also it's able to generate coherent text articles. So yeah, that's that. And of course there have been lots of works later on transformer XL as well, which I think I would be discussing later, but I think I'll stop here. I'm sorry, this went on a bit long. Please forgive me. This is the first time I'm doing this, so I'll take a note from the next time that such a I do not drag along uh, unnecessary points and focus on more necessary points. So this is a takeaway for me. And if you like this video, um, please share it and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.